May is Mental Health Month. And I thought I did a mental health panel last night with a few people awesome over at the Dragon Con stream. And there's a story for Daddy Tell Me a Story I wanted to bring up specifically. So I thought this would all work together. So under how do I get some help? And I know all three of us have gone through things. I would be surprised, Joe, if it wasn't something to do with the church, which is perfectly fine and acceptable. Kurt, I would, my guess for you, Kurt, it would be peers and or mentors. And I'm curious to hear. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so let's see. Probably right before COVID, I started seeing a therapist. And mainly because I I cared about my friends so much that I didn't want to burden them with my problems.
Gotcha.
And I couldn't turn to family because you can't talk openly about them to them. Right?
Yeah.
And that's not
Yeah.
even saying that you're mad or you're angry or whatever, it's just being brutally honest about what you're feeling and what you're going through. And it took me forever to accept that I needed to talk to somebody. And once I did, it was probably one of the best things I ever did. Now I stopped seeing them after about a year, but I was in a much better place after that. And I was able to process things that I think I was borderline depressed, clinically depressed.
Sure.
Because there was talk of medication. And that's a mental block for me. I wanted to go as much as I could without having to go through medication and whatnot. Although there were a couple of times where it's not even judgmental. It was a thing for me. And I thought about it a couple of times, but I got to the point where just talking things out, and being able to talk to somebody without judgment was very valuable. Very, very valuable. But it was hard. And finding somebody, I had to ask somebody I trusted for a referral because I didn't want to do the Yellow Pages. Oh, Yellow Pages Kids. That's an old timey book.
I'm
sorry.
Joe. Explain it to Joe.
Yeah. So Joe, the Yellow Pages is an old timey book. Oh crap.
Yeah. It's the one that strong people would rip in half, right? That was all it was ever used for.
Oh, you've seen those reruns. Okay, yes. so yes, it has these things called paper pages. And they would have telephone numbers of nearly everybody in your area. It was the weirdest thing.
But why were they yellow?
That was businesses. The white ones were for regular, normal residential people. But I didn't want to randomly choose somebody, right?
Sure.
I had to ask for referrals. Now, luckily, I had a friend who works in a therapy office, and she's not a therapist, but she had like 4 that she worked with in the office. And so I said, "Can you refer me to someone?" And that was the way it went. And he was great. He really was awesome. And I appreciate everything that he did for me and helped me do, even during COVID, because we did all telehealth stuff, but it was a Zoom call basically.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was great. But it's sometimes hard to get over that first hurdle. And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I know that from a societal standpoint, especially guys my age and older, there was a whole lot of stigma attached to suck it up and handle your crap, and now my generation has gotten to a point where we kind of are accepting that, we got to get some help. But there's that divide even within Gen X that, handle your crap and I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
So what about you guys?
The only time I've gone to see a therapist was after my dad passed.
Mm-hmm.
So my late teen years. So when I was 16, went and saw a therapist. Me, my sister, my younger brother, all did. Because my mom wanted us to go have someone to talk things out about. And it helped. It did. And my mom was seeing a therapist at the time as well. Um, and yes, that was one that, um, unlike random kid who said the first step in getting help is to ask. This one, I didn't ask. My mom said, "You're going," and I resisted at first. I really did. And then she also and this wasn't a therapist, but she scheduled me and my sister to go to I guess a bereavement group that the school put on. My high school put on a bereavement group, and it was like once a week during one of our periods. We would be excused from class to go to this group, and we talked about memories of our loved one that had passed. We talked about our own viewpoints for the hereafter and things like that. And so, yeah, I know a couple of times people were like, "Oh, I really appreciated your comment during that," and stuff like that. So it helps. It helps to talk.
But you were school age.
Yeah, my dad passed when I was 16.
Oh wow. Okay.
So what beyond that kind of help? What about? I mean, I did actually envision, Joe. You said you might say, "Yeah, I spoke to my." I don't have the terminology right. This is not me being funny about Mormons, but what in my world would be a pastor. I spoke to my religious leader about you don't even this or a dilemma I had parenting. I knew the story about your therapy. We had talked about that one before, and I do agree with Random Kid. I changed it a little bit. The first step in getting help is actually admitting to yourself you need it, which is basically what he's saying about asking for help. But you really have to allow yourself to ask for help. I know certain points in my life, I went to my parents, and then that became not a thing for me because I didn't have that that guilt, that stigma of like you don't get counseling, but the counseling had to be church basically, and you go
Sure.
talk to your preacher or whatever. Well, my dad's my preacher, I'm not can't really go do that, and then unfortunately a lot of the time the help came down to pray about it, and throughout different parts of my life, I did a little bit of marriage counseling. I did talk to some preachers. I have found in my life that I outrun people mentally very quickly. I'm very self-aware about things. So if I'm stuck, essentially you're helping chip away and you break that hole open, then I just run and it scares people. But I always say that to say, I think a lot of people are that way. I think my wife's that way. We have not done therapy, and I'm very clear about that word therapy because there's counseling, which I've done a lot of, and even better help with what I did on that app. I liked the app, but it was counselors. It was not licensed therapists, which is a
Sure.
different ballgame.
Yep.
And my wife did it too for a little while, and we both had kind of the same issue. We're talking to somebody that's not clicking. They're not either listening or we feel like we just sense that very much that rote answer because they don't really know what to tell us. And my wife gave up before I did. I mean, I got to the point where I was okay. I was like, yeah, this is just not where I belong right now, is in that arena. But she gave up. And I think it's because you have to allow yourself to one, get help, but then secondly, understand that not everybody who's offering help can help. And that's again, I'd recommend BetterHelp. I'd recommend any of the apps that you find work for you. I did BetterHelp twice. I did it once for a little while, got somebody to help me some. I had a breakthrough. They didn't know how to keep up, so I just stopped doing it. And then later on I did it again. Same kind of thing is I don't, because you're right, Kurt, it is helpful to talk to people without judgment. That's literally my origin story for podcasting. You talked about you can't talk to your family about them, right? Because
Right.
I mean, at least for me personally, I was young, I was in my late 20s. And so part of me knew I was probably wrong about some of my opinions and thoughts, but I needed that open therapy. Well, I didn't know therapy then, but I needed that space so a therapist could guide you around the mistaken crap to the real crap. But somewhere in there, you're like, I can't talk to my family about this because they can't help me. And so ultimately, that's why I turned on the microphone and just started talking to the world, because strangers are strangers, and I don't really care. A therapist is a stranger, really, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at a monitor screen or a wall at the time. I'd look at a wall just to tell my stories, because I think it boils down to, for all of us, you have to talk to somebody. You have to get help somewhere, and Google is out there. Is it? I know Georgia has a suicide prevention, not suicide prevention hotline, mental health emergency hotline. I don't know if it's a federal number or not, but in Georgia, we have one. I should have looked it up. I guess I just thought of it. But there's instead of 911 and 411, right? It's 811 is what I think the mental health line is. It's been a hot minute since I've had to recommend it to somebody. I always try, and that's the other thing. Good, Jeff.
Tennessee's is 988.
Gotcha.
But yeah, you can search for it if you need it. It's pretty easy to find.
So there's stuff like that. You can Google all kind of stuff around you. Sometimes I've never been to an AA meeting, but I quote that serenity prayer quite often in life to people and working on things into myself.
For those that don't know it, why don't you just say what it is? Because it's good.
Okay. I when I say quote, you realize who you're dealing with, right? I have pieces of it, and the pieces are, Lord, help me to change the things that I can, let go of the things that I can't, and the wisdom to understand the difference of the two. Something
basically.
Yeah. And I mean, there's just because you're not alcoholic doesn't mean you can't go to AA and just talk to some people who understand trauma. Go ahead, Kurt.
So just to Joe's point, 988 is the national hotline.
Oh, okay.
All right. So I got it mixed up.
Like 911, 988 is available for everybody in the United States.
Yeah. So there you go. That's something to know more about. We also need to make sure people understand that we can listen without judgment, because if we can't, we can't, right? My wife and I, we're not going to give therapy to each other. We're going to fight shit out. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Sorry, Joe. Oh. Mental health month. Mental health. I just messed up somebody's mental health. I apologize. Come to our Discord. We'll give you a free counseling session. Kurt will talk to you.
We need a disclaimer on there.
Yeah, please.
We are not professionals. We are geeks.
We're the council of dads.
We have 2 ears.
So
if you want to spill your guts to a dumb beep, then you can absolutely talk to me.
I do apologize for that one. But you have to be available, right? There and truth matters, and you have to be able to say truth in a certain way. So there's definitely people I can talk to. There's definitely people that I know can listen. But if you don't find it the first time, you got to keep looking, is what I'm saying. I've had people at work talk to me about their life. And that for me, I'm good with. I'm not friends with any of my employees. Everything is I'm very personable. And so and in our line of work, I think in any line of work, but definitely in EMS, personal and work mesh a lot there. Honestly, I want to throw this one out to you guys, and we'll move on to the next section as you wish. But sometimes being self-aware, or you can help yourself counsel, right? And once you admit you need help, you're open to help. Listening to podcasts about the help that you need, about the things you're going through, or just something that you feel drawn to will help. It might, you don't understand. I was doing research on an author that I was going to interview, and she actually did an episode on her ADHD. And while I have some ADHD, it's not like what most people deal with, right? And my wife has it worse than I do, and so on and so forth. But even that, it didn't help me with any of that. What she was talking about helped me with another section of my life that I was struggling with, that really went through. Okay. So Joe said his wife's therapy, she listens to a bunch of true crime murder. You know what, Joe? You shouldn't be worried because that's not a how-to. That's a everybody gets caught. My life is not quite as bad. I see why she murdered her husband. My life's not as bad.
Yeah. I've told my friends around here that if I ever die of mysterious causes, it was my wife. She did it. She'll get away with it, and I probably deserved it.
Yeah. Random Kid says having someone you can be vulnerable with is crucial to mental health.
Yes.
I definitely have somebody that, even if it's, because usually we schedule calls or something to hang out or text or whatever. So if I just randomly call, if they can't talk, they'll go, "Hey, are you okay?" Because we are vulnerable with each other and we get each other's back. So I mean, that's how do you I want to hear from you guys whatever you want to say about this, but what's one way you show yourself vulnerable to others that you help them?
I only because I want to jump in only because this is one of the key things in my weight loss daily vlog stuff. And the way that I show that I'm vulnerable and show my true self is to be as transparent as possible when I'm recording these daily vlogs. Sometimes it's just like, here are the stats for today, no big deal. Sometimes it's like, man, I'm having a really bad day, and I went over the edge, and I did this and I did this. But it's the key to all that for me has been complete honesty. And it is really hard to accept to be truly honest with yourself and then be able to say that out loud. Really hard. And
would you say part of that is your therapy? Like you're not talking to a therapist in that moment, but you're being vulnerable to a therapist.
Oh yeah. It's absolutely cathartic. Like I can by simply being open and honest and transparent to a bunch of strangers, even though I've gotten to know some of the people that follow me, just that helps relieve some stress. And frankly, just saying things out loud makes you feel lighter. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it's really funny. I had a situation today with my boss. We do quarterly, they're not really reviews, but they're quarterly discussions. And we had an issue like a couple of weeks ago where he criticized me in public.
I think you talked about that.
I might have. And today it came up. And honestly, by now, it's water under the bridge. He's one of my best friends in the world, so we don't hold grudges for very long. It's a heat of the moment thing. But I said, you know what would have helped? If you just said, "I'm sorry," right away.
Yeah.
Because his response to me was, he did reach out right away and he said, "Are you okay?" But that's not the question I wanted to hear, because that expects a response out of me now.
Right.
And makes me take responsibility for reacting to it and whatever. But if he had just said, "I'm sorry," then I would have been able to go, "Oh, okay." And that's another topic for another night, probably, is the types of apologies. Because there's like 6 major ways to apologize and accept apologies and how people react and everything. It's a whole different thing. But winding back, it's all about just being as open and honest as possible and being truthful with yourself first and then with anybody you're talking with afterwards.
Couldn't follow that out too much.
Roll that dice.
Shut up, Mike.
Charles had to remove me from the stream momentarily because my facial features were
killing me. He is so. His heart is there, and he's talking. And Joe gets a text from his wife about being murdered in his sleep. Yep. I don't see that. When he sees it,
I know.
It was like we're in church because the preacher was preaching, and Joe sitting there. I'm looking down. I took him off. I even kept my little hover over you to remove was over your face. Okay.
I had a
He's
Death
done.
Star
He's
moment.
back.
I had a Death
Yeah.
Star moment. I was just like, stay on target.
Exactly. And then like, okay, I bring him back. And
My
the
bad.
second his digital eyes lock digital eyes with me, he tries to laugh. I cannot ruin this moment.
I'm
But for
sorry.
crying out
My bad.
loud, son. You kidding me?
Oh man.
And that was well said, Kurt. And thank you for getting through it.